You're very welcome back to Thursdays Off the Ball. We got there in the end. We'll get to the hurling in a moment. Daithi Regan and Denis Walsh are standing by to preview the Munster and Leinster finals. But just to let you know that, well, last week, you can listen back to it on offtheball.com. We were live in Cork at St Finbarr's in association with SuperValu. Next up, we're heading north to, come on, Luke Descale, Guidor in Donegal on Wednesday, July 10th. We'll be talking all things Super 8, Donegal and Ulster football. I'm going to be joined by Eamon McGee, Kevin Cassidy, Brendan Devaney. It's going to be a bit of a party, I suspect, and many more big names to come as well. It is an exclusive off-air event, so the only way to enjoy it is to be there on the night. You can get your tickets right now on offtheball.com/events. It's all with thanks to SuperValu. So some great football previews and conversations to come over the next few weeks. Right now, though, we're talking hurling because it is a huge weekend. The Munster final and the Leinster final both taking place. Joe McDonagh Cup as well. Daithi Regan and Denis Walsh of the Sunday Times are on the line. Evening, lads.
Evening, Joe and Nathan.
Daithi, so it is Munster final at 2 o'clock, Limerick against Tipperary, and then the Leinster final at 4 o'clock, Kilkenny against Wexford. Proper order, is it, that the Munster final is warm-up for the Leinster final?
It's probably unusual. The Munster final would have been seen as the blue ribbons really back to years, and again, I suppose playing both of them on the one day is a bit unusual, but the last couple of years has been a bit of a change. Obviously, with the new system that's in, and it's working to a point. I think we had a wonderful championship last year. Some people obviously a bit disconcerted that Galway finished on 5 points and are out of the championship, and that Limerick conceivably could lose 3 and still go through. But it is what it is. It's there for everybody. It's the same for everybody. But I think we're going to move up the gears again on Sunday. It's for once, you know, we've spoke about hurling over the last number of years about the importance or non-importance of winning provincial titles. I think it's back to winner take all the weekend again. And I guess you could say, from a Leinster point of view, Wexford needs something tangible after their efforts the last 3 years. And that's understandable why people would attribute that they probably do need to win something. I think it would be just dessert for them because the momentum that they've brought forward under Davy has been extraordinary if you consider a number of years ago where they were in the pecking order, and particularly it doesn't seem that long ago since Kilkenny were been described with the eulogies of being arguably the greatest of all time. In hurling terms, it's a relatively short time for Wexford to have turned it around and be just more than competitive. And I think the really intriguing thing for me in Munster is the game itself is something to really look forward to, but I've had a feeling for quite a while, and coming out of the Limerick-Clare game, I think I spoke to you guys that evening, and that these two teams were going to take a lot out of one another over the course of the next 2 to 3 months, and at that stage I thought it was quite feasible, and if not likely, that they were going to contest a Munster final, and similarly whatever way it would work out an All-Ireland semi-final or All-Ireland final.
Yeah.
And I have felt that the one possible detraction to the ambitions of both of these sides is that they become, or we all become enthralled in, you know, a very specific Limerick-Tipperary rivalry that I don't think either manager really wants. And I think it was patently clear for all to see, despite the protestations coming from the Limerick camp, that there was a lack of effort or somewhat a lack of effort against Tipperary. That game was pretty anemic compared to what we're going to see the weekend, because Limerick must go all guns blazing the weekend. You cannot build confidence mentally with players if you're trying to retain an All-Ireland final, having lost more games than you've actually won as the championship progresses. So that's going to be pretty fascinating as well, to be honest.
Yeah, and Daithi, just on that, because I do remember you saying that at the time, that we end up with this trilogy of, well, we haven't had a classic in the first game, but that Limerick and Tip are the two best teams in the country, and they end up meeting each other on these 3 occasions. What is the problem with that? Are you thinking that they obsess over each other and then they get caught out at some stage, that they're just thinking about Limerick or they're just thinking about Tipperary? If they end up being a classic Munster final and end up meeting in a semi-final or final and that's a classic, what's the issue?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues. One, I'm reminded of Meath in Dublin in 1991 and the 4-game saga that they had there. If you remember, Meath struggled really to pick up to the levels that they did that were required to beat Dublin. They actually drew their next game against Wicklow in the championship, and ultimately came up short when handing or down, taking a massive lead in the All-Ireland final. And just the legs, the will, the mental strength, the courage and the ability was there, but it's got to be everything to win the big one. Everything must be right. So my concern would be that they take too much out of one another. They become consumed with one another, and then the attrition that comes with it, and the potential for injuries that come with it as well. Because I think the weekend will be an extraordinary battle, and for a lot of reasons. Liam Sheedy, both managers, I just think are really, really intelligent people, intelligent managers. So Sheedy won it the first day, and it was an important win for them, because Limerick were shown of a number of their, there was 4 All-Stars not starting. So if Tip had lost that, question marks may have percolated throughout Tip that, well, Limerick have rested someone, we still couldn't beat them. Limerick, on the other hand, now have no option, because if they're to lose again to Tipperary when it counts, and let's remember, Limerick have openly said they want the Munster title. The National League, we should never underestimate, for All-Ireland champions to come out and win the National League after not winning an All-Ireland since 1973, showed where the mental fortitude was with Limerick. So they clearly want to win a Munster final as well, which everything indicates an epic. And I just think the attrition that comes with it and the expectation level, because if Limerick win, Tip are still and will be fancied in the top 2 still to win an All-Ireland final. And let's not forget, you have other teams there who are strong contenders, who aren't going through the same kind of mental, what is mentally taken out of these two teams, if you get what I'm saying.
Denis, your thoughts on this, because obviously there was a bit of shadow boxing in the last game of the round robin, particularly from Limerick's point of view. Tipperary have had a very settled side in the championship so far. I think 12 of the teams started all 4 games in the round robin. They've had this huge injury blow with Bonner Maher missing out. How much of this Munster final do you think isn't just about the silverware, it is about the mental side of it, that if Tip can beat them again, they know they've the upper hand on Limerick, but if Limerick overturn it and produce a totally different performance and are right at it and are at the level they were at last year in the All-Ireland, actually it gets into Tip's head that, when they really want it, when Limerick really want it, they're a better side than us.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Yes, I think there's huge psychological capital at stake here on Sunday. For Tipperary to not win the Munster Championship, having won all 4 games, that would be a setback, no question about it. They didn't hold anything back 2 weeks ago. I kind of, as Daithi was saying, Limerick have protested that, they were going all out to win the last day, just that they were going all out, but not their full team. If you go back through John Coy's quotes this year, after the league final and at the Munster Championship launch, he kept referring to what he described as a failure in his management last summer of not using enough players during the championship in Munster. And I just went back through it, and he actually made one change in 4 games last year, and that change was enforced. Aaron Gillane was sent off against Cork, so he was suspended for the game against Clare. Shane Dowling started against Clare, and in the final game, started against Clare. Against Waterford, and in the final game against Clare. So basically, he played 14 of the same players in 4 games last year, and you could see, if you go back to his comments, Nathan, he was determined not to do that again. So the only game, they actually haven't played their All-Ireland 15 in any game this year, league or championship. The only time they came close it was when they fielded 14 against Cork. So against Waterford, only 12, against Clare, only 12, against Tip, 11. So, again, leaving off 4 All-Stars looked pointed, it looked kind of cute, it looked like as if they were hedging for the next day, or whether that was a Munster final or whether that was a quarter final or whatever. Yeah. But he was absolutely determined to rotate his squad, come what may, and as long as they were safe and everyone knew they were safe before the last game, he was going to stick to his original plan, which was to rotate. I fully expect it'll be back to 14 of the 15 from the All-Ireland final when the team is named tomorrow night. I imagine Flanagan will lose out, and Peter Casey will be starting with Gillane inside. And it'll be absolutely mental. I think it'll be a real proper old-fashioned Munster final where it doesn't matter that there's a safety net. I think I think it's gone far beyond any safety nets. I think both teams absolutely need to win this for different reasons.
And if the Limerick team, Dennis, is as you're expecting, there are 14 of the 15 that started last year's All-Ireland final, has Kiley got what he wanted then out of the Munster round robin? Has he got that little bit of extra depth if none of those players have been able to force their way into the starting lineup?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, this is the point. I mean, we've been saying all year that Limerick have an incredibly deep squad, and like we'll say, during the league they were careful. On average, they played 11 of their All-Ireland final team in the league. Now that dropped down for the Laois game, only 6. But we say for all the games that there was a chance they could lose or whatever, he made sure he had 10 or 11 of the All-Ireland final team in it. And we were marvelling at the players coming in and how well they were doing and how well they were slotting in. But when it came down to it, when it came down to the Cork game, which was a game that they really wanted to win in the first round of the Munster Championship, he played 14 of his All-Ireland 15. And on Sunday, I think we'll see 14 of his All-Ireland 15. So even though they have depth and they have options, he does know what his best team is.
If Declan Hannon's back in at 6, and we'll see what happens with Bubbles O'Dwyer where he plays, how crucial will that be, that battle, if it comes into play?
Well, it's absolutely crucial, no more than Paddy Maher the other end of the field, because it's such a pivotal position, and it's always been the way since a year dot. Really good number 6s are the linchpin of any defence, as we've often said before, and to repeat myself, Eamon Cregan always said centre back is locked and centre forward is the key. What's changed over the years is the way teams have tried to break centre backs. Before, it was kind of a big, strong, physical man, and if you could limit what they were doing, and then moved on to more mobile centre forwards, and then you had the situation with Brick Walsh a number of years ago where Noel McGrath played on him, played off him, and everything was played through Noel McGrath, and he gave an exhibition of long-range point taken. I think what's really intrigued me about Tipperary and Limerick to date, while Limerick have been my fancy all along, I have to say I think Tipperary are in the best place they've been since they've last won the All-Ireland in 2016. I think the Magic management are back. I think the players are playing for themselves, for what it means to be a Tipperary hurler, the culture that comes along with it, the importance of it, and it is very important, and I say that as near neighbours. I have a huge respect for the value that Tipperary put and what it means to be a Tip player and the responsibility they have to their culture, to their supporters, etc. We haven't always seen that from Tipperary. Going back to 2010 when they won the All-Ireland final, they've never been able to put back-to-back, and they've been a disappointment actually in many years. And there's been all sorts emanating from the camp about maybe a discipline and over-celebrating. So I do think that the management, although I did question Eamon O'Shea coming in when he did, I certainly got that wrong from what we've seen to date. It appears that he's living up to the reputation and that he has fitted in, and it hasn't in any way put Tommy Dunn out. And obviously Liam Sheedy is at the helm and is an extraordinary manager of situations and getting the best out of his middle management and therefore, getting the best out of players. What I really liked about Tipperary, and it's worried me a little bit the last couple of weeks thinking about Limerick, is Limerick are very patterned in the way that they play and they're very good at it. What Tipperary have is they have off-the-cuff forwards. They have individuals who can take a touch on a ball and in one fleeting moment can pop it over the bar from 60 yards. Limerick don't play like that. Limerick play more percentages. So to beat the Tipperary forwards when they're on, you have to have an ultra-aggressive defensive system where each defender is playing what I would describe as touch-tight hurling, that you're physically really trying for 70 minutes to get inside the head of the tip player that you're marking. Because anything from a half a yard room and Tipperary will punish you. I actually don't see the Limerick forward line being that decisive and sweeping when they get possession as to be able to. They're brilliant when they're on. There's a hell of a lot of movement, a hell of a lot of width and depth and angles to the balls that they're playing in, and when they're on and they have room to play a ball in, the movement inside means they're getting to it quick. But I just think it's more pattern to get them to where they need to get to, whereas Tips is more off the cuff, predicated on just absolute supreme skill, touch and accuracy, which is why I've kind of slightly changed my mind coming into this, even though I do suspect, like David, that Limerick will play a full squad, why I still think, unless Limerick really, and I mean this in a positive sense, batter those tip forwards, hard and fair, but if you give them any kind of yardage at all whatsoever, they've shown it to date. They're back to the levels of 2010, they're back to the levels of 2016. They're that good when they're on.
Dennis, looking at the Leinster final then, Kilkenny against Wexford, 4 o'clock throw-in at Croke Park. Again, these two sides met last time, it was a draw. It feels as though this is a more pivotal game for Wexford, considering that they haven't won a Leinster title since 2004. But also, when you look at their record during the round robin, the only team they beat were Carlow. They ended up drawing 3 of their matches, that they need to prove almost to themselves that they can win a game of this magnitude.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, I think it's a huge opportunity. I think it's kind of, it's a game that they can win. It's a game that it's like, 2 years ago when they reached the final against Galway were kind of really on the up. They were, a savage force to be reckoned with at the time. It was their All-Ireland winning year, and they put Wexford away in the second half. But that was a pretty inexperienced Wexford team. All of them kind of experiencing the Leinster final for the first time. 2 years on, they've had 2 years in Division 1 of the league, 2 years of their own robin in Leinster. They're a hardened outfit now. I was down at the game 2 weeks ago. That was a terrific game, an unbelievable battle. The collisions, just it was just a fierceness about it. And Wexford were arguably lucky enough to win. Like, Kilkenny missed chances that you wouldn't expect them to miss. You wouldn't expect TJ Reid to be held scoreless again on Sunday. You wouldn't expect Walter Walsh and Killian Buckley to be so peripheral. So you can see where Kilkenny can find 5 or 10% improvement, and it's maybe hard to see where Wexford can find that 5 or 10% improvement. But there's one stat that I go back to. I actually mentioned it on this show a couple of months ago, and it's actually uncanny the way it's working out. If you go through what Wexford scored in the championship in Davies' 3 years in charge, excluding games against teams outside the top 9, so you're taking out Carlow, Offaly and Westmeath the last 3 seasons, they averaged 118 in his first summer in charge. They averaged 118 in his second summer in charge, and they've averaged 118 in his third season in charge. Now, 118 was good enough, or 21 points was good enough for a draw against Kilkenny 2 weeks ago. But they're not going to be winning really big games at 118. I'd be amazed if 118 was good enough to win the Leinster final on Sunday. And yet, that's what they've averaged 3 summers in a row.
Daithi, when you think back to the game a couple of weeks ago, I know a lot of people felt maybe Matthew O'Hanlon was, I don't want to say overly physical, but was very mouthy, very much in TJ Reid's face, that it was a little bit of sportsmanship there, lack of sportsmanship at times there from Matthew O'Hanlon, and ultimately he ends up getting sent off. But for the vast majority of the game, he did a brilliant man-marking job. He kept TJ Reid scoreless. Do you want the same again from Matthew O'Hanlon? Do you want him in TJ Reid's face right from the off, or did he need to go about it a different way this time?
I wouldn't agree with what you're suggesting there. I think the sending off was silly and immature from the point of view, a guy who leaves a hand pass off, takes 2 steps, and then you stay going into him and hit him hard down the chest. That was really, really silly thing to do. You're on a yellow card. Maybe he thought it was gone, the game was gone and the frustration was over. In relation to the way he handled TJ Reid, I thought it was an education in how you break a forward.
Right.
And to be honest with you, my own personal view is, and watched it very, very closely, I thought it was an extraordinary disciplined performance from him. I think to have the courage of your own convictions to take on the best hurler, not just forward, in the country, apply yourself to the task. I'm a firm believer that when you take on a forward, no matter how good he is, everybody has a chink, everybody has a breaking point. Nobody's done it to TJ to date. He's been extraordinary and exemplary in the way he's carried himself. But O'Hanlon was given a task, because if he didn't do what he did, I think Wexford weren't going to win the game. So he was brave and courageous in that he was risking and left for dead by TJ Reid, and you look pretty foolish then if you want to go aggressively at it, because general consensus is people would like to see Reid do well on any player who's trying to, what they feel, badger, and particularly neutrals as well. So he wasn't interested in that, nor was his manager interested in that. He was given a task, and he carried out his task absolutely brilliantly. Maybe some would fault him. I wouldn't fault him in any way. I'd love to have a defender like that you can say, there's the best forward in the country, here's your task. The sending off was silly, but for the rest of the game, I thought it was quite incredible to watch both of them, because TJ is no shrinking violet. As skillful as he is, that kid is well able to handle himself as well. I thought it was an extraordinary battle to see between both of them.
Yeah, and one to savour again on Sunday. And TJ Reid has rightly received so many plaudits this summer, and people talking about his greatness alongside the Kilkenny greats of the last 10, 15 years. Is this Sunday the sort of day where you need then to prove that greatness again, that when you've had a game like that against Matthew O'Hanlon so recently, that the great players learn the lessons from that, they know what Matthew O'Hanlon can bring in terms of that man marking, in terms of that physicality, and that TJ Reid brings something different to get the upper hand? Is that what you're expecting?
I think it's a very interesting point that you're bringing forward there, because number one, he certainly doesn't have to prove anything. Secondly, when does that ever happen where he's absolutely taken out of the game completely? Just never. Will he question his own ability? He absolutely won't. Will he think about what's coming down the line? He absolutely will. Now, I do think that the greater space that's there, and let's remember that this place was packed to the rafters. Wexford fans particularly even at the seams, and it was claustrophobic, so it lent itself to be marked like that. Croke Park is different. He'll have more freedom, and he'll certainly, I think, be allowed more freedom by his manager as well. To kind of, he's one of those forwards like Henry Shefflin and Joe Canning that you just tell him, your domain is anything from 65 yards out into the end line.
Yeah.
You travel where you need to travel. Once you're moving, it's very difficult to be targeted. So I expect it from the likes of puckouts and that. Like, he's a brilliant man to fetch puckouts, but I think you'll also see him from 20, 25 yards away from the landing zone, kind of getting there at speed, but always moving. When you're moving, it's harder to be a target. So I just think it's one of those fascinating battles that we can look to. Again, one of the ones that comes to mind that I remember that before was I think Martin Doherty and Christy Heffernan in the Ireland final in 1982, where Doherty was, I think, cleaning Heffernan for the first 15 or 16 minutes, and then Christy banged in both goals. But it was that much of a focus point between those two wonderful players at the time that whoever was deemed, I think Martin Doherty had come back from Cisco, whoever was going to get the upper hand could actually carry that much weight and importance that it could dictate the game. Now, I think it probably was a little bit, overstated, because Kilkenny won it very well. But they're just one of the ones that you remember. Yeah. Hubert Rigney and Martin Story are great battles. Liam Dunn and John Power, absolute battles that you remember, like Keelan Carey and Ollie Baker and Colin Lynch and whoever it was at the time. We've not seen that as much because it's not as much of a game of attrition as it was back then. But these two gentlemen will certainly bring it again the weekend, and I just think it's one to whet the appetite.
Yeah, you've teed it up nicely. The hurling show, as always, was streamed live earlier today on Facebook, YouTube and Periscope, and up and offtheball.com as well, as it does every single Thursday lunchtime across the summer. Shane Stapleton was joined by Michael Verney and Will O'Callaghan. Conversation turned to Richie Hogan's status within the current Kilkenny setup.
What does it say to Richie Hogan now? Because he, 5 years ago, was hurler of the year, or was it even 4 years ago, 2014 or 15? Yeah. He was key man. Everything revolved around him, whether he played full forward, centre forward, wherever. The game plan seemed to revolve about get the ball to Richie Hogan and he's going to do damage. He was an unused sub the last day as well.
Like, there was Richie, the day against Limerick last year was, I honestly think it was like the fifth or sixth game he had played. He was played 5 or 6 games or come on and hadn't scored. Yeah. Like, and even the day against Galway,
he had a goal then against Galway.
Yeah, he got 1-3 or 1-4, I think. He has had a lot of shots in games, and even against Galway he had shots, and I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be flowing for him. Cody obviously doesn't think he's shown the form to be in there. If he's on form, he plays, he contributes at some stage, but if he's kind of hit and miss, and it seems to be, it's very deflating when he hits those couple of wides in games, which he has done, take the Limerick game out too, so I think Cody's, if he's playing and he's showing the form in training, he's going to play him, but if he's not going to put him in there.
He mustn't be right.
Too. He mustn't be, no, he's had ongoing back issues for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, that's Shane Stapleton, Michael Verney and Will O'Callaghan talking about Richie Hogan's position within the Kilkenny panel. Dennis, just on that, I guess the lad summed it up. If he was fit, if he was firing on all cylinders, Brian Cody's going to select him. Unfortunately, he's had injuries at the wrong time, and this probably isn't the time of the season where he could be taking a chance on a player.
Yeah, and I mean, Brian Cody would be famously fastidious about this. I mean, if you're not fit, if you're not firing, if you're not in the whole of your health, he made mistakes early in his career, playing players that weren't fit, and he swore that he wouldn't do it again. Now, he has made exceptions over the years. He made exceptions for Henry Shefflin and maybe 1 or 2 others. And Richie Hogan is in that bracket. I mean, Richie Hogan is a player that, he could... I mean, Michael Fennelly's another guy that he would have nursed and taken a chance with on occasions. And And you know, Richie Hogan, if he was 90 or 95% there, I'm sure he'd be all over him. But I actually bumped into Richie Hogan on the day of the league final press interviews in Croke Park, which was sort of last week in March, and he was getting ready to go to Cork to play a challenge game, and that was his first game of the year for Kilkenny. Just because he just couldn't. That was the first time that he was anyway fit to even attempt to play a match. That was a challenge game in Parky Ring. So, you know, he's been slaughtered with injuries over the last couple of years. But I mean, he was exceptional last summer when he came right. I mean, he was brilliant that day against Limerick. When the day he scored 1-3, he was also very good against Galway in the Leinster final replay, if I remember. So, like I wouldn't say the fire has gone out yet, but I mean, you also must remember, like, he's been knocking around now for 10 years, you know, with all these injuries and aggravations and bits and pieces. 10 years is a long inter-county career by any man's standards, and you know, when you add in the knocks and so on, you know, I'm sure they've taken their toll. Look, I was surprised as anybody when he wasn't used against Wexford the last day, especially when the game was so tight and scores are hard to come by. You know, he's the kind of guy, even though he didn't make an impression against Galway, didn't really make an impression against Dublin, you're still hoping if he got one or two balls that he'd stick them, but he obviously just doesn't have that he doesn't have their confidence to that degree at the moment, for whatever reason.
Daithi, very briefly, the Joe McDonagh Cup starts things off at Croke Park, 1:45, Laois against Westmeath. Shane Keegan was in earlier talking about just what this means to Laois, and certainly parts of the county of Laois. There's a huge crowd heading up for this match, and obviously there's a big prize at stake as well for the winners. Who do you think the winners are going to be?
I do think Laois, but I don't think by a lot. I was at both games. I was at Laois and off the game, and I was very impressed with the way they tried to play. It didn't always come off, but I liked the way they stuck to what they were doing. Westmeath would have been very disappointed after beating Offaly very well to throw up the results against Kerry the following week. And then when Antrim had a lot to play for up north, Westmeath went up and were really clinical in that. And then they played out. It was 118 or whatever, 123 against one another with neither really needing to show their hand. But I think great credit is due to both Joe Quaid and Eddie Brennan, relatively young managers. You know, Joe has quite a bit of experience there. He's been up in Kildare as well. But they're young and they're innovative and they're trying to play the game in the right way. And they played in a different way, and they come from a more traditional era. But they've opened themselves to different technique. But they're not handcuffed either to systems. You know, I've been really impressed with both of them. I've seen Westmeath as late back as over the last couple of winters in World Cup games as well. And you can see it was kind of embryonic, and Joe is taking it on even a stage further. But what I like about both of them is the way they're trying to play hurling. It's all fast. It's all about space. It's all about touch. It's all about playing with the heads up. And both need to be applauded for that. Of course, it is a secondary competition. Of course, they're not to the level of, and Carlo obviously suffered a small little bit. It's probably a tweak I'd like to see to it, because Carlo, with so few clubs, are doing a wonderful job, have been. Laois, I can remember looking at them down against Cork playing in Tullamore 5 or 6 years ago. Teddy McCarthy was there, and on the end of a 30-odd point hiding. So you don't claw that background back that quickly. But both are going the right way. But from what I've seen of both, I think Laois might just have that little bit too much for them.
All right, good stuff. Thanks a lot for that. Daithi and Dennis. Daithi will be at the Leinster final for us on Sunday. Kilkenny against Wexford. We'll have James O'Connor down at the Gaelic grounds for Limerick against Tipperary. Up next, though, we are going to be looking at the Women's World Cup. Henry Bushnell of Yahoo Sports will be talking about Megan Rapinoe.
Off the ball on News Talk. Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Coming up this week, I'll meet the Galway student working on a device that aims to eliminate chemotherapy-induced hair loss. Plus, I'll hear about SEAT's venture into the world of electric scooters.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Download the podcast on Friday from noon or tune in Sunday at 6.
On News Talk.
Your to-do list. It's always pretty chock-a-block. There's the things from